The next speaker is Colette Dufresne, and she will speak from the table, because if she stands here, you won't see her. So it's a very practical solution. And both Colette Dufresne and Marie-Claude O'Neill are going to talk about best practices. So it's one of the items mentioned by Emanadi in the CECA activities for the coming years. And Colette is focusing on the principle of using best practices. So Colette, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm used to this problem since a little more than 25 years. Well, as the President told us about a few minutes ago, last fall in Shanghai, she commissioned Marie-Claude O'Neill to work on best practices. And Marie-Claude asked me to work with her. So, rapidly working together, we discovered that the definition we were using were quite different, and really they were fuzzy. So Marie-Claude asked me to work on a definition and to try to explain why we could not share a common definition. So I'm going to present very briefly the synthesis of what I found. I mean, as an academic, the first thing I did was to go and review what was published. So I reviewed what was published in French, of course, in English, and in Spanish. And as I found very little in museology, I went to other fields in administration, law, engineering, new technologies, psychology, education, social service, nursing, medicine, and environment. I'm going to present a PowerPoint, but I must say that I wrote also a 15 pages text in French that will be published shortly, I hope, and that presents the synthesis in full. I'm going to go through the PowerPoint very swiftly as I could, because I want to leave as much time as possible to Marie-Claude O'Neill, who will present the core of our work. So, what I found could be resumed in 3 questions. First question is, what is a best practice? And you could imagine that I found something complex. So I'm going to deal with equivalent terms of best practice. Then, what is this thing called best practice? What are the requirements to call something best practice? A prerequisite? Who determines what best practice is, in which ways? Then a second question, could we agree on a definition? And finally, what about diffusing best practice? The equivalent term. So I found 2 other ways to speak about best practice, but they were a lot less used, less frequently used. It's leading practice and exemplary practice. So what is a best practice? So what is this beast called best practice? It could be 2 things. It could be ways of doing things, techniques, procedure, methods, or series of methods. It could also, of course, be practices. Practices could be intervention, action, series of actions. In our field, it could be programs, for instance. These 2 these process and products should have 5 qualities. It is effective, transferable, new, it obeys to principles or standards, and it's very important to mention, it could evolve with new knowledge or with the change of technologies. So, what are the fundamental requirements? So, I found 3 levels of achievement. I start with the highest level. The highest level is the practice is superior to the others. I mean, it is considered the best in the field. Another level, a lower level, is the practice is consistent with certain values, goals, or standards. And the third level, less demanding, the practice is generally accepted. So you already see a great variety of possibilities. If we want to have best practices, we have to decide, we have to evaluate. So there is a prerequisite to that, is to have a definition, but not a definition, a description, but not any description. It could be described formally and in details. If we have an evaluation, we have to have somebody who is doing it. So who are the people who are doing it? It's always an authority recognized by the domain. But you could have 2 kinds of authorities, a group of experts or a group of peers. Then, if we have people who are ready to evaluate, what will be the process? A practice is recognized as a best practice according to a formal system or process. It's always formal. The authority I mentioned, I mean peers or experts, could examine 2 kinds of things. It could be just general features of the practice, or it can be a series of precise aspects included in a grid of analysis. And the judgment of the authority could be based on a variety of things that we will see. The judgment of the authority could be based on the mere opinion of a jury. It's the less demanding. Another possibility is a comparison of the examined practice with others already considered as best practice. Well, it's benchmarking kind of process. But you also could use criteria, and the criteria could vary a great deal. The criteria could be simply determined by the group of experts, or they could emerge from research results, or we could add up emerging from research results plus data derived from formal evaluation. Let me explain just a second. Emerging from research results means that, for instance, if you have a new drug, you go back to the literature, that describe the condition for the drug to be effective, while the data derived from formal evaluation will be the data that you get from making tests with the drug. Then you have a third series of criteria. It's still emerging results from research, plus data derived from formal evaluation, plus accumulated knowledge gained from practice. One short remark, again, I found this last series of criteria, especially in nursing and medicine, because, as you could understand, accumulated knowledge gained by practitioner means that, for instance, a doctor observe that aspirin, for instance, is very effective with a certain type of patient and not so much with another one. So it's very important to have all this. So could we agree on a definition? The answer is yes, but it's yes if. If we accept that best practices are a sort of practices, in fact, a constellation of practices. These practices should have in common 5 characteristics, the one I mentioned. They are effective, transferable, new, conform to principles or standards, and evolve with knowledge and technologies. These practices could be classified in a great number of categories determined by the nature of the professional activity, what aspects are evaluated, the means used to do the evaluation, the level of exactness required. Then, what about diffusing best practices? What is needed? If CECA decides to diffuse best practices, we need, at least, some means to analyze the practices, preferably a grid of analysis, and it's what Marie Clarté will be presenting. In fact, the grid of analysis that Marie Clarté will present is not only useful to determine best practice, but it will have a lot of other possibilities, you will see. So, a means to analyze the practice, some means to evaluate the practice under each item of the grid of analysis, a detailed description of the candidate's practices, and a jury. I thank you for your attention.